Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm going to apologise in advance because I'm going to be leaving shortly after the presentation to hop on a train back to Dublin, but with my short visit down here, I'm really delighted to get a chance to present some research findings to you today. So as has already been said, the presentation's going to focus on the results of a survey of homeschool community liaison coordinators or HSCL coordinators. But before I go into talk about the findings of the survey, I might just put the survey in a bit of a context, and I'll conclude then with some broader considerations about parental involvement more generally. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge the authors of the report, of the survey, Susan Weir, Lauren Kavanagh, Eva Moore and Aisling Ryan. As already been noted, the authors of the report are unable to be here. Susan Weir, whom some of you may know, has taken early retirement. I saw her yesterday and she looks fantastic. Similarly, Lauren Kavanagh is working in Paris at the moment. So that's why I stepped in to give the presentation. As many of you will be aware, DESH stands for Delivering Equality of Opportunity in Schools. It's a programme aimed at addressing educational needs of children and young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. It provides integrated school support through a school support programme, or SSP, and the SSP emphasises school planning, and it focuses on activities to develop literacy and numeracy. As of the last school year, 2017-18, there are roughly 700 primary and 200 post-primary schools in the SSP. So where does this fit with HSCL? Well, there's quite a close link between the DESH programme and activities and the HSCL scheme, which sort of sits inside DESH, or sits inside as part of the broader provisions of the SSP. The HSCL scheme has quite a long history, dating back almost 30 years, with the establishment of the scheme as a pilot project in just 55 primary schools. And a woman by the name of conceptualise was instrumental in driving this scheme. It's expanded from those 55 schools to being in all urban and all urban primary and all post-primary schools in the DESH or SSP scheme. The original aim of the HSCL scheme hasn't changed. Its aim is to improve outcomes for students indirectly by focusing directly on the adults in their children's lives. And it has an emphasis on promoting partnership between parents, teachers and the community. There are a few other points about the HSCL scheme that might be worth noting. Firstly, home visits are a key part of the HSCL coordinator's role. Teachers are assigned to the role of HSCL coordinator for a maximum of 5 years, and of the annual DESH grant that's given to each school, a minimum of 10% is supposed to be spent on HSCL activities. So turning now to the survey, the survey questionnaires were sent out in spring 2017 to, I think it was about 413 of all 416 coordinators in the country. So it was a population survey of all coordinators. The survey got a 77% response rate, which is quite good in terms of surveys of this kind. And the survey was quite broad in nature, looking at things like how do coordinators spend their time, what do they feel works well, what do they feel is really important for the success of their work, and so on. So I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of the key findings of the survey. And as I mentioned, you can get more detail in the full report. I suppose with surveys of this kind, I was actually talking with colleagues over lunch, it's kind of difficult to get the balance between a broad survey which gives information across the whole group, and then when certain findings come up, trying to work out how do we delve into those to interrogate them more deeply, or to understand those findings in context. So the findings here are more at a broad level, but there's a couple of findings that point to the need to delve in a bit deeper. In general, this slide here it's a pie chart showing, broadly speaking, how HSCL coordinators spend their working time. And as you can see, there's a roughly 50-50 split between spending time working with children's parents and their families, and then on other tasks which relate to administration and so on. Looking a little bit more closely now at the work with the parents and the families. As I mentioned before, home visits are a really important aspect of the scheme, and the pie chart shows that about 1/5 of coordinators' time was spent on home visits. This is actually a little bit lower than the percentage of time that coordinators talked about in 2000, or mentioned in 2001, so it's dropped from about 30 to 21%. And it's a little bit less than the Department of Education and Skills recommendation that 1/3 of coordinators' time be spent visiting homes. So this is a finding that probably merits a bit of a closer look as we delve into the data further over the coming year. I'll just quote from the report as well. So Susan Weir and colleagues commented that it is possible that issues such as homelessness, crime and substance misuse, issues which most coordinators indicated were prevalent among families served by their schools, have resulted in coordinators arranging more individual meetings with parents outside of rather than in the home. So this is why we'd like to look at this finding in a little bit more detail as we go through this year. The second part of the pie chart shows you that about 13% of coordinators' time was spent in meetings with parents outside of the home, and this is a slight increase from the 2001 survey results. So as you can see, there's been a decrease in home visits and a slight increase in out-of-home visits with parents or meetings with parents. Then other activities with parents took about a 1/5 of coordinators' time, and the range of activities is quite broad, and examples include organising activities such as coffee mornings, working with core groups of parents on a specific activity or goal, or acting as course presenter or facilitator on course for parents. Other activities, I wanted to put this slide up because it shows you the broad range of activities that HSCL coordinators cover. Their role involves administration, communication, liaison, organising, so it's quite a broad role, and I would imagine it's quite a challenge to maintain all of this work with the direct work with the parents and their families. Another part of the survey asked what HSCL coordinators did with parents. So I'll go through the results, again bearing in mind this is a very high level sort of key findings, look at the results. We can look at the activities in 3 groups. The first group shown here is activities targeting parents and or pupils. I don't know if you can see this slide very clearly, but the graph shows percentages of HSCL coordinators reporting a range of activities. The left-hand side of the graph is primary and the right-hand is post-primary. So the graph shows you that almost all coordinators said that the parents helped recruit participants for the courses they were organising. There was also very widespread involvement of parents in classroom activities at primary level, which is a really positive finding, and a large drop-off in this activity at post-primary level, which isn't really surprising if you think about the type of activities that would involve, such as paired reading, would be more common at primary than post-primary. There's a little bit of a drop-off in the frequency of the percentage of HSCL coordinators indicating each of the other activities as well, and a finding that we might delve into a little bit further as time goes on is the drop-off in involvement in after-school activities. What types of activities exactly are they, and are they perhaps equally important at primary and post-primary? So maybe we'll look at that a little bit further this year. The second area that HSCL coordinators talked about in the survey was parents' contributions to school life. And again, we can see a pattern here similar to the previous slide of higher levels of involvement at primary than post-primary. Fundraising and extracurricular activities were reported by a very large majority of coordinators, and these include activities like parents being involved in a school concert, a sports day and so on. And again, you can see the drop-off at post-primary there. The picture for the third cluster of activities which relate to school management is a little bit different. You've got similar percentages at primary and post-primary, although you can see somewhat greater involvement of parents at post-primary than at primary level in a couple of these areas, including school policy formation, membership of local committees, school planning. And according to the HSCL coordinators, the policies most likely to involve parents in their development were relating to behaviour or discipline, school uniform, healthy eating, anti-bullying, attendance and schoolwork. Now there's a lot going on in this slide. What do they say? Every picture tells a story. This slide shows the percentage of HSCL coordinators indicating that various activities impacted, sorry, let me try and get the wording right, that it's the perceived impact of the HSCL scheme on parental involvement in activities. Am I making sense? Okay, so this slide shows you the percentages for the 2001 survey in the lighter blue and the most recent survey in the darker blue. And there's a lot going on in this. I could probably talk about these findings for, a number of minutes or even half an hour. But I want to note two aspects to the graph. The first is the areas of greatest impact, according to the HSCL coordinators of the scheme on parents, were firstly and most of all, that parents, in their view, feel less threatened or perhaps less alienated from school or teachers. Secondly, parents were more aware of their own contributions to their children's learning. Thirdly, that parents had a new interest in school life and school activities. And fourthly, that they visited the school more often. If you look at the light and dark blue bars, you can see a fairly consistent pattern of higher levels of perceived impact in 2017 than 2001. Now, this of course could be due to the differences in respondents, or the slight differences in the schools in the scheme at both time points, or it could be due to differences in the response styles of the respondents. However, because some measures are behaviour-based, such as visiting the school, the authors of the report are interpreting this to be suggestive of an increase in impact, which is consistent with the notion of increased impact over time as a scheme gets further bedded into the system. This slide shows the perceived impact of the HSCL scheme on the local community. And the pattern of results suggests that the HSCL work is pretty much on target, because you have the largest perceived impact in terms of the local community on increased parent confidence and involvement. However, it could be worth exploring reasons for some coordinators reporting lower levels of impact on some of these items. For example, greater community spirit or increased role for school in the community. And this, and I suppose the couple of points I've said already about the need to delve into the data further, we really think in order to do that properly, we need to understand the local context of the school and the school's community, which is something that a broad survey can't do on its own, if you know what I mean. The coordinators also told the researchers which factors impacted the success of their work the most. And the slide here, again, I don't know if the text is too small for you to see. The factors or the graph confirms the key leadership role of the principal in facilitating the success of the scheme and the whole school approach, as well as in the importance of providing coordinators with learning opportunities to work and discuss their work with other HSCL coordinators, and also the buy-in or support from teachers and parents. In other words, the success is possibly contingent in the first instance of strong facilitative leadership and a range of factors operating or coming together. So I've thrown a lot of information out. I might just dwell a bit about parental involvement more generally. Parental involvement is a highly researched, highly discussed area, as you're probably well aware. And one thing that we've been scratching our heads about a little bit is that it's difficult in some studies to find consistent associations between student achievement on the one hand and parental involvement on the other. However, in some of these research studies, there is either an implicit or an explicit bias in favour of always looking at student outcomes in terms of achievement, and I think we really need to move away from that. So, for example, some of the links aren't there because activities which are not directly associated with achievement may have really important benefits for the child. An example of this is parental involvement in some aspects of the school management, such as the Board of Management and Parents Association, may model active citizenship and demonstrate to pupils that the parents value the school. But yet, a very narrow analysis of student achievement scores would not even go near capturing this. Other analyses that focus on parental involvement and achievement measures find negative results. And this is often because parents become more involved when problems do arise. So there's research there that will show you that more involvement in homework may be a response to low achievement. Similarly, more frequent visits to the school by the parents may be indicative of a difficulty with the child at that moment in time. So I think we need to be very careful when we're interpreting research on parental involvement to look at what is the outcome. Are we talking about achievement on a test? Are we talking about something more broad? So that's one point I wanted to make. In considering the results from international studies, and I'll give you an example from primary and post-primary level in the next couple of slides, we think there's value in maybe looking more in national context perhaps at informal involvement of parents. And I'll talk through the two examples so you'll see a little bit what I mean. A colleague of mine, Lorraine Galeese, used data from the 2012 PEARLS, or Progress in International Reading Literacy study, which looks at fourth class children. And she examined the association between fourth class reading achievement and measures of parental involvement. Informal parental involvement, she conceptualised in the study. She's limited to some degree as to what's measured on the questionnaire, but she took informal involvement to be measures including parental expectations for educational attainment, how often pupils and parents talked about schoolwork and about school in general, and parents making time for homework, or in other words, having a regular homework routine for their fourth class child. And she found that informal parental involvement accounted for some of the differences in reading achievement between DEIS and non-DEIS schools. So that's an interesting finding. Similarly, if we look at post-primary level, and just one example from the data or the literature comes from PISA, that's the Programme for International Student Assessment. It's an OECD study of 15-year-olds. A report by the OECD a couple of years back showed that students who reported that their parents were interested in their school activities performed better on the PISA test than students who reported a lack of interest. I think the really interesting thing, and I wish I'd actually shown you the graph here, this was true overall, but the relationship was actually stronger among lower performing students. That's a very interesting finding. And the other interesting thing, which I suppose part of what I hoped to do today was throw out some ideas rather than maybe give answers. But I think it's very interesting that in these and other studies, parental involvement mediates much of the effect of parental education on academic achievement. Or to put it another way, the advantage of high formal parental education is transacted through parental involvement. So that's maybe a little bit of food for thought. Some final thoughts then. With any social science, psychological, educational research, there is a proliferation of models and ideas, and I've thought a lot about how to organise things in terms of how to think about them. And I think that Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory is a really useful way to conceptualise this area of research, not only because it gives a framework to structure our thinking, or my thinking at least, about it, but also, I think this is really important, Bronfenbrenner, and this is going back 40 years or so, he built the model on the premise that human abilities and their realisation depend in a significant degree on the larger social and institutional context of individual activity. And I suppose he was a wee bit ahead of his time in emphasising this premise. Now, more recently, McNeill has used this framework and has shown that student performance and the relationship between performance and parent involvement is contingent on local context. And the research argues for the need to extend investigations of parent-child interactions to include aspects of these contexts. So it's kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier about the wish or the need to delve further into the data in context to really understand it better. And Joyce Epstein, whom you've probably heard of, she's done a lot of work on partnerships. She's commented, "No topic about school improvement has created more rhetoric than parental involvement. Everyone says that it's important." And she emphasises the importance of partnership, and she configures this within her overall model as she configures partnerships within a set of overlapping spheres of influence in a child's life. So I suppose just reflecting on these thoughts, the above suggests the importance in the context of the present survey of the HSCL coordinators of learning, maybe as a follow-up, about parents' views of the HSCL work as contingent on their own local context. So I'll sign off there. Thank you very, very much for listening. As I said, the report is on our website. My colleague Lorraine Galeese, who's now working on the strand of work that Susan Weir would have worked on previously, she would be delighted to have conversations with you on this or any other work related to educational disadvantage if you'd like to start a conversation with us. And thanks again for your attention. And my apologies that I'm going to have to step out and leave, and I wish you a really fruitful remainder of the conference and a good weekend. Thanks again.